Donald Trump's victory in the United States presidential election brought significant unpredictability to international trade, particularly with key North American partners. One of President Trump's most controversial promises was his intention to impose a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, including crude oil, two of the United States' main oil suppliers. This approach, aimed at protecting domestic industries and addressing trade imbalances, has raised concerns about its potential economic repercussions for both countries. Now, just days into his term, he has reiterated his commitment, declaring that the tariffs on Canada and Mexico will take effect on February 1st, which is less than 10 days away. This is not the only executive order the new United States president has signed. On his inaugural day, President Trump issued several significant executive orders early in his term, sparking widespread debate. One order reinstated over 8,000 military members discharged for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine, including provisions for back pay. Critics warned this could weaken military health protocols and set a precedent for future vaccination mandates. To combat illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and human smuggling, Trump deployed troops to the United States-Mexico border and designated Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. This approach raised concerns about border militarization and potential diplomatic tensions with Mexico. In a major environmental shift, Trump signed an order to exit the Paris Climate Accord, lift restrictions on fossil fuel extraction, and halt new offshore wind farm projects. Environmentalists criticized these actions, warning they could exacerbate the climate crisis and hinder progress towards sustainable energy. Additionally, Trump pardoned approximately 1,500 individuals involved in the January 6 Capitol riot, drawing backlash from those who viewed it as undermining accountability and encouraging future unlawful behavior. Another executive order reversed diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives from the previous administration, with critics arguing this could dismantle efforts to address systemic inequalities and inclusivity in federal agencies. A controversial order targeting gender identity recognition enforced strict binary definitions of sex across federal agencies, eliminating protections for transgender and non-binary individuals. Advocacy groups condemned this measure, arguing it denied the existence and rights of transgender people. Finally, Trump withdrew the United States from the World Health Organization, citing dissatisfaction with its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and alleged political bias. Health experts caution that this could hinder global health initiatives and weaken the United States' ability to respond to international health crises. In this video, we examine the tariffs imposed on Canada and the potential retaliatory actions by Canada, which could negatively affect the United States economy. Canada and Mexico collectively account for over half of all United States crude oil imports, with Canada alone supplying about 3.8 million barrels per day, more than half of total imports. Mexico, the second largest supplier, delivers billions of dollars worth of heavy crude oil annually to United States refineries, which rely heavily on these imports to meet domestic energy demands. The proposed tariffs threaten this vital supply chain, potentially causing higher energy costs for American consumers and businesses and jeopardizing the economic stability of two key United States trading partners. Moreover, the tariffs could strain long-standing economic relationships established under the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, and provoke retaliatory measures, with both Canada and Mexico considering counteractions to protect their national interests. This emerging trade conflict underscores the complex interdependence of the North American energy sector and highlights the broader risks of escalating protectionist policies in a highly interconnected global economy. Canada is currently evaluating possible responses to the proposed U.S. tariffs. A primary option under review is reducing or halting oil exports to the U.S., a move that could have far-reaching effects. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has been a strong proponent of using energy as leverage, suggesting the stop of electricity exports to the U.S., which could impact around 1.5 million American consumers, especially in states like Michigan and Wisconsin that heavily depend on Canadian energy. In Alberta, the situation is more nuanced. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has opposed the idea of cutting oil exports, stating it would severely harm the Canadian economy since Alberta produces most of the crude oil exported to the U.S. Her position is critical. Smith has warned that such a move could destabilize Canada's energy sector, leading to revenue losses, job cuts, and potential disruptions in domestic politics. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has taken a cautious approach, emphasizing the need for a balanced and measured response. The federal government is exploring alternative retaliatory measures, including targeted tariffs on U.S. goods like steel, aluminum, and orange juice. This multifaceted strategy aims to protect Canada's economic interests without unnecessarily escalating the conflict. Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced a snap election for February 27, aiming to secure a mandate to address the economic challenges posed by the proposed U.S. tariffs. Ford described the tariffs as an attack on Ontario's economy and emphasized the need for a strong response. Pierre Poilievre, leader of Canada's Conservative Party and a leading candidate to succeed Trudeau, vowed to retaliate against the U.S. if the tariffs are imposed. He emphasized that such trade measures would harm both nations and pledged to take pinpoint and surgical actions to impact the U.S. if necessary. Poilievre also indicated plans to explore other trading partners to mitigate the tariffs' impact on Canada. In a show of national unity, an Ottawa entrepreneur created a "Canada is not for sale" hat in response to President Trump's tariff threats and suggestions that Canada become the 51st state. The hats gained significant attention after Premier Ford wore one during a meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau, leading to tens of thousands of orders. The initiative aims to unify Canadians and counter rhetoric that threatens Canada's economy. Additionally, the Canadian dollar has strengthened against the US dollar, reflecting investor skepticism about the implementation of the proposed tariffs. The loonie rose 0.2%, trading at $1.4350 per US dollar, marking a 0.9% increase for the week after recovering from a near 5-year low. Concerns about the severity of the proposed tariffs influenced trading, and oil prices, a significant Canadian export, also saw slight increases. The tariff issue has brought rare political unity in Canada. Provincial leaders, regardless of political affiliation, are standing in solidarity with the federal government. Premiers of key provinces like Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec are backing strong countermeasures to protect their respective industries. Public sentiment in Canada is strongly opposed to the tariffs, with social media campaigns and protests gaining traction. Movements calling for consumer boycotts of U.S. goods are also emerging, highlighting the growing frustration among Canadians. Reducing or stopping oil exports to the U.S. would have profound economic and political effects for both countries. For the United States, this action would disrupt energy supply chains and increase costs for consumers. States such as Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, which are heavily reliant on Canadian crude oil and electricity, would face shortages and higher energy prices. These disruptions could have a ripple effect on the U.S. economy, particularly in industries dependent on affordable energy. For Canada, the economic impacts would be equally severe. Crude oil exports are a major revenue source, and any significant reduction could slow GDP growth, raise unemployment in the energy sector, and strain provincial budgets. Alberta, in particular, would bear the brunt, potentially increasing tensions between the province and the federal government. The economic downturn could also lead to higher inflation, further complicating Canada's domestic economic situation. Politically, the repercussions could be just as destabilizing. Cutting oil exports would likely strain Canada-U.S. relations, undermining the cooperative framework of the USMCA. This could result in retaliatory actions from the U.S., further intensifying the trade dispute and reducing the chances for a negotiated settlement. Given the significant risks of cutting oil exports, Canada is considering other options. One major alternative is imposing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods critical to specific states. This approach mirrors Canada's response to U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum in 2018, where similar duties were applied to American products like bourbon, orange juice, and steel items. Another strategy involves diversifying energy markets. Canada has been investing in infrastructure projects such as the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion to improve access to global markets, especially in Asia. This would reduce Canada's dependence on the U.S. as its primary energy customer, providing more flexibility in future trade negotiations. Enhancing domestic energy security is also a priority. By investing in renewable energy and boosting energy efficiency, Canada could decrease its reliance on fossil fuel exports while positioning itself as a leader in the global transition to clean energy. These actions would not only lessen the impact of trade disputes but also align with Canada's long-term environmental goals. Mexico's retaliation strategy in response to President Donald Trump's plan to impose a 25% tariff on Mexican imports, aimed at reducing migrant arrivals and the influx of synthetic fentanyl, includes several countermeasures to protect its economic interests and maintain the trade balance between the two nations. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has indicated that Mexico might impose reciprocal tariffs on U.S. goods if the proposed U.S. tariffs are implemented. She highlighted that such actions could lead to a tit-for-tat escalation, potentially harming businesses operating in both countries. Sheinbaum stated, "One tariff would be followed by another in response, and so on, until we put at risk common businesses," emphasizing the interconnected nature of the U.S. and Mexican economies. Beyond potential retaliatory tariffs, Mexico is proactively working to strengthen its economic position by reducing its trade deficit with countries like China and attracting foreign investment. President Sheinbaum introduced the Plan Mexico, which aims to replace a portion of imports with domestic production and develop key sectors such as automotive and aerospace. This plan is designed to enhance Mexico's economic resilience amid external trade pressures. The Mexican government has warned that the proposed U.S. tariffs could lead to significant economic consequences, including the potential loss of around 400,000 U.S. jobs and higher prices for American consumers. These concerns stem from the deep integration of supply chains, especially in industries like automotive manufacturing, where components often cross the U.S.-Mexico border multiple times during production. Mexico's Economy Minister Marcelo Ebrard has expressed a commitment to finding a diplomatic solution to prevent the implementation of U.S. tariffs. Drawing on experiences from previous trade negotiations during Trump's first term, Ebrard emphasized the importance of cooperation and mutual understanding in addressing shared challenges such as migration and drug trafficking. He also criticized renewed protectionist threats, asserting that they would significantly harm both economies. In addition to possible retaliatory tariffs, Mexico is actively seeking to strengthen its economic position by decreasing its trade deficit with countries like China and attracting foreign investment. President Sheinbaum unveiled the Plan Mexico, which aims to substitute a portion of imports with domestic production and develop key sectors like automotive and aerospace. This strategy is intended to bolster Mexico's economic resilience amid external trade pressures. Canada has consistently been the top supplier of crude oil to the United States, a position it has strengthened over the years. By 2023, the U.S. imported approximately 3.8 million barrels per day from Canada, making up over 50% of all U.S. crude oil imports. This figure has steadily grown from around 2.4 million barrels per day in 2010, driven by the expansion of Canada's oil sands production and the development of cross-border pipeline infrastructure such as the Keystone Pipeline system. The increase in Canadian imports has been facilitated by the geographical proximity between the two countries and the compatibility of Canadian heavy crude oil with U.S. refining capabilities. Refineries in the U.S. Midwest and Gulf Coast are optimized to process heavier crude types, which are abundant in Canada's oil sands. The value of crude oil imports from Canada reached $97.18 billion in 2023, underscoring its vital role in U.S. energy security. Mexico is the second largest supplier of crude oil to the United States. In 2023, the U.S. imported approximately 42.6 million barrels from Mexico, further solidifying Mexico's role as a dependable energy partner for the U.S. However, concerns about Mexico's declining production capacity and policy shifts favoring domestic consumption have raised doubts about its ability to maintain export levels in the long term. President Donald Trump's proposed tariffs on Canada, Mexico, China, and other major trading partners have sparked widespread concern about the potential economic impacts, not only for the targeted nations but also for the United States and the global economy. The interconnected nature of modern trade amplifies the effects of protectionist policies, leading to retaliatory measures and cascading disruptions. As details about the planned tariffs and responses from U.S. trading partners emerge, it is clear that the consequences could be significant, extensive, and long-lasting. Canada, the largest supplier of crude oil to the United States, accounts for approximately 62% of U.S. oil imports, equating to about 3.8 million barrels per day. The Canadian government is considering a major countermeasure, cutting oil exports to the U.S. This action would disrupt a deeply integrated energy market, especially in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, which heavily rely on Canadian energy. The economic impacts for the U.S. would be severe. oil prices could surge, increasing costs for consumers and industries. Moreover, retaliatory tariffs on American goods such as steel and agricultural products would heighten economic pressure, potentially leading to losses in GDP and employment in both countries. Canada's trade with the U.S. reached approximately $1.1 trillion in 2023, highlighting the high stakes for both economies. A major trading partner has indicated its willingness to impose reciprocal tariffs on U.S. goods. The Mexican government has warned that Trump's proposed 25% tariffs could result in the loss of 400,000 U.S. jobs and a significant increase in prices for American consumers. Key industries at risk include automotive manufacturing, where components frequently cross the U.S.-Mexico border multiple times before final assembly. Retaliatory measures from Mexico could target U.S. agricultural exports, particularly corn, soybeans, and meat, which are vital for American farmers. Mexico is one of the largest importers of U.S. agricultural goods, and any tariffs or restrictions on these products would further exacerbate the economic impact, especially in rural areas dependent on farming. China, another major target of Trump's trade policy, has suggested halting or limiting exports to the U.S. while redirecting its trade to other markets. With a diverse global network, China can afford to shift its focus to Europe, Asia, and Africa, reducing its reliance on the U.S. market. In 2023, the U.S.-China trade volume reached approximately $600 billion, with the U.S. running a trade deficit of nearly $350 billion. Any restrictions on Chinese exports, such as electronics, machinery, and rare earth materials, could disrupt American industries that rely on these imports. China's retaliatory actions might include tariffs on U.S. agricultural products and high-value goods like aircraft, potentially targeting politically sensitive industries. This would strain key American sectors and escalate economic tensions. The European Union, EU, one of the United States' largest trading partners, could also implement retaliatory measures. In 2023, the US-EU trade volume exceeded $1.2 trillion, making the EU a crucial partner in goods and services. Previous tariff disputes, such as those involving steel and aluminum during Trump's first term, provide insight into the EU's likely response. The EU could impose tariffs on iconic American products like bourbon, motorcycles, and agricultural goods, as it did in past disputes. Additionally, the EU might leverage its significant influence in global trade policy to rally other nations against US measures, potentially forming a united front that economically isolates the US. Another potential area for EU retaliation could involve targeting US technology companies operating within Europe. The EU has already undertaken antitrust actions against major American firms, and further measures, such as increased taxes or regulations, could escalate tensions further. The combined retaliatory measures from Canada, Mexico, China, and the EU would significantly impact the US economy. Key sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and technology are highly vulnerable to global trade dynamics. Disruptions could lead to job losses, retaliatory tariffs, and reduced export opportunities, resulting in substantial job losses across industries, particularly in agriculture and manufacturing. Tariffs on imports from major suppliers would elevate the cost of goods, placing a greater financial burden on American households. Many industries, including automotive and technology, rely on integrated supply chains that span borders. Disruptions caused by tariffs and counter-tariffs would delay production and raise costs. Economic models suggest that a widespread tariff war could diminish US GDP growth, undermining domestic economic stability. The world is bracing for the implementation of Trump's proposed tariffs. While intended to protect domestic industries, these measures risk triggering a series of retaliatory actions from Canada, Mexico, China, the EU, and beyond. The interconnected nature of global trade ensures that the negative impacts will not be confined to the US. However, American consumers and industries are likely to bear the primary consequences. The potential rise in consumer costs, job losses, and disruptions to critical supply chains highlight the high stakes of this policy direction. Whether these tariffs will be enacted and how the retaliatory measures will unfold remain uncertain, but the economic landscape of 2025 and beyond will likely be shaped by the outcomes of these escalating trade tensions. Thank you for watching. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today.